Welcome back to the show, my fellow exploring Americans. For today, we have a special guest called Ashley Johnson. Ashley is an award-winning collaborator, sought-after educator, and CEO of Gardner and Grace LLC, a virtual around-the-clock shop providing spiritual transformation services to the masses. She spent 10 years as a spiritual development and religious education teacher and 10 years in corporate America. She's credentialed through the Unitarian Universalist Association as a religious educator, adjunct faculty at Iliff Seminary, and trained in spiritual transformation in children and youth by Reverend Dr. Leanne Hadley. She's one of the few people that understands the intersection and balance required between spirituality and business, and that is one of the main reasons I have her on the show. Ashley, are you there?
Hello, Cosmos. Yes,
I,
I am here.
Ashley, I'm really glad you took the time to do this show with me. I wanted to touch on a certain themes regarding the balance between the spiritual and the material world. But before I ask about that, Ashley, I wanted to know. So I know you are like an entrepreneur and CEO, and you have been in corporate America. Can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about your background and how you got started?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me here, Cosmos. It's so nice to talk to you. So my journey started really in college when I was studying psychology. I got some great advice, just study what you love. And psychology was what I loved and what made people tick. And close to the end of my time there, I started thinking like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do for work? How am I going to make ends meet? How am I going to get out there and do all the adulting things that I needed to do? And that's when I took a course in advertising. And that's when I started to see this connection between really the human spirit and business. And from there, I sort of like went down this windy path of really getting one foot in the business world, but my heart and my soul were always it was tugging at something else, and I was constantly looking for this intersection. So I spent about 5 years in corporate America in telecom, and it was like, it's just numbers, it's just money, it's just driven to make money, which is not bad or wrong, but I felt that part of me that was really craving more was just not getting fed. And so it was like this imbalance. Treaded on in corporate America, and then just made a pivot to do spiritual transformation work with children and youth, and really went with my heart's calling and my soul's calling and did that for 10 years. And then it was like the pendulum went a different way, where I was really doing my heart's work, but the money wasn't there. So I went back to corporate America. And again, nothing wrong or bad with it. It just was like this constant teeter totter of, do I follow my heart's work or do I follow where the money is? So went back into corporate America, was there for about 5 years before just going full force on my own and bringing both of these worlds together, the spiritual piece and the business piece. And that's when I founded Gardner and Grace.
Wow, Ashley. So there's a lot of points to touch over here because first of all, like normally a lot of people that go into the corporate world, they are doing it for the money, they're doing it for the status, and they're doing it for all that. But also there's like a lot of people in America right now that want to attain like their calling. They want to go for the true calling, but they usually don't understand how to like basically monetize that and like how to like do both. But like here we are where you had to go through the same journey and the process. So can you tell me during your journey throughout your life, as you went through all of this, like what is the great motivating factor that was ultimately driving you, like when both in like the religious education side and in the corporate America side?
Yeah, great question. And I so agree with you, Cosmos. There's so many people out there who are in jobs for the dollars or for the status. And again, nothing wrong with any of that. But where I have such pain for people like myself, like you, like your listeners, is when there's it's like their soul's getting crunched, right? Like they're in there in this environment, they're in there in this work, and they're making good money, and yet there's just like still something missing. And that really was my journey as well, of there's just something in my soul, in my heart, that was missing. And that's what kept me going, Cosmos, was this constant tug of, you're meant to do something more, you're meant to do something else. Yet I had to really quiet down all the noise of, but you should be, you should be, you should be, right? At this age, you should be making this money. At this age, you should be at this title. So for me, it was a lot of quieting that down, that chatter, and then turning up that light inside, which all of us have. Your listeners, you, all of us have this beautiful light inside. And that's really what I want to draw out of people.
So actually, like, question, like, during your time, like, what is the biggest lesson you learned overall, like, during your time in corporate America, as you were going through these revelations, and like, how did you apply it when you're like transitioning it to like starting your own business?
Yeah, such good questions. So some of it's really practical and some of it's really just heartfelt. So one thing that I will say that's really heartfelt is trust your gut. Trust your gut. We in corporate America, I can tell you, we are so focused on the data and the numbers. And I love data and I love numbers and I love analyzing. And where I saw the problem was just living from there, living from, but what do the numbers tell us? And what if we do something wrong? And how many people I felt would just benefit from, like, trust your gut, right? Like, you've been doing this job for 10, 15 years. What does your business sense think? And right, there's studies out there and research out there showing, like, we actually don't make great decisions if we are just trusting our guts. And I think that's bonkers. We need to trust our guts definitively. There's more out there in terms of intelligence and knowing than we're willing to give credit. So that was one thing, was definitely trusting the gut. And the other thing is, you mentioned transitions. This is just really practical. Like, transitions are hard. So transitioning out of a corporate environment, if that's what one's journey is, and that's what I did twice, transitioning out of that corporate environment can be really difficult. There's safety there. There's monetary safety there. There's familiarity there. So being really cognizant with the transitions, giving yourself grace, taking a lot of breaths, being focused on just one step in front of the other. So those are two things that really helped me, and big lessons when I was circling in and out of corporate before landing on Gardner and Grace.
So, Ashley, you bring up a really important point. Like, it's about trusting your gut. But however, like, there's society tells you the opposite of, like, a lot of times society's advice is the opposite of trusting your gut. They tell you to get this good job, get this good career, have the status, have the titles and everything. You got to have the respect of everybody around you. And ultimately, a lot of times this does not, I mean, it might work for some, but for a lot of people, it's basically against their calling. They have something that they really want to do, that they're passionate about, but they're stuck in this kind of like solidified type of reality, like, that is given by society, almost kind of like a matrix, you know. And so even though what you're saying is true, like, you got to trust your gut and you got to go with what your calling is. And I completely agree, because Extraordinary America is ultimately about people finding their calling, monetizing their calling, and ultimately being financially free. But how do you exactly go from what, like, the environment is more powerful than us, like the society has a really powerful influence on us. What would make us have that courage and the thing to go and trust our gut and go for our calling?
Yeah, Cosmos, I think we're just not practiced at it. I think that we have a lot of intuitive sense within us that we are just not practiced at. What we're practiced at is listening to that noise. What we're practiced at is listening to those voices saying, you're not good enough unless you do X, Y, and Z, right? You're not good enough unless you climb the corporate ladder, or unless you do all of these things. And I want to be really clear here that it's not for me about saying that any choices in corporate America are bad choices. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying I think we're really not practiced in trusting ourselves. I think we're really not practiced in coming back into center. And simple things like quieting our mind. And it can be something as secular as taking a walk, or something really as spiritual as going deep in meditation. If we can quiet our mind, that is one step in just to coming back into that inner knowing. And that's where I get a lot of my guidance and intuition. But I can't do it when I'm listening to a lot of the chatter. So turning some of that chatter down is what is one of the really, really important aspects. And it's super practical. Just turn that noise down, right? We don't need to listen to all those voices that are telling us the things that we really don't need to hear.
I mean, I think you have a point over there. Like, our minds are so restless, and like our world has been designed, like the modern day world is designed in a way to like keep our minds consistently restless. Like we're living in this modern world, like the 21st century, where you have cell phones, TV, radio, like you have like outside the bustling of cars and all that stuff. There's always some activity going on, and our minds are always going here and there. But there, I mean, back in the ancient times, it was a much more quieter, like a rural kind of thing, like where like these things just came naturally, where we had more opportunities to quiet our mind. But in the modern day world, it's really difficult to do unless we make an active effort for it.
Exactly, exactly. And you named it, the active effort. And I would challenge even back in the rural days, right? I mean, there's things that are out there making noise and taking our attention, and it's a lifelong practice. I think human beings really, it's part of our being to have those heightened awarenesses, right? That's safety for us to know that something's out there that may or may not be dangerous. And it's our job to continue to quiet it down. You named it so well, that restlessness of the mind, especially in our modern day with the buses and the cars and the dings and the cell phones, and even something just super simple, Cosmos. This is what I love, the simplicity of, you can turn your cell phone off, right? You can put your cell phone in a drawer. You can turn your ringers off. And that's, I hear like busy moms like, oh my gosh, no, I couldn't possibly do that. And I'm not suggesting that one little simple trick is going to work for everyone. I'm saying we have choice. Like, right? Like, who else can you say, hey, if the kids are going to call or the school's going to call, you're on point for an hour. I'm putting my phone in the drawer for an hour. It can be super simple to bring, as you say, that restless mind back to center.
So ironically, like one of the things that I realized is like in terms of like, religion and spirituality, it tends to be a more of an Eastern kind of thing, of like a lot of people in the West consider something like meditation and all this intuitive knowing as Eastern stuff. Like it's not really part of this thing. But like ancient people, a lot of them did do meditation and prayer, and it was like a part of it. But like from your point of view, Ashley, how can you practically apply? Because I think today's world, they're looking for practical applications of this spirituality and spiritual techniques when it comes to like making more money and like being successful in their life. How can they apply this in a practical way to their business and to their personal life?
Yeah. So the one thing that I would suggest that has both spiritual and business implications, and I could quote a litany of spiritual teachers who say this, and a litany of business people who say this, right? So how often would you get like advice from the Dalai Lama and Warren Buffett in one piece? But here it is. Focus. Focus is what is necessary to quiet the mind, to both come back into center where our intuition and our knowing and our guidance is. And focus is what is required to move any good business forward. And when you combine the two, truly, when you come back into that focus and center within, from there, all my good decisions have been made from a business perspective. I'm more calm, I'm less reactive, I'm more able to engage in a business conversation. So I really think that dichotomy, as you point out, in the Western culture is really a false one, right? These don't need to be separate. They're one and the same.
No, ironically, yeah, a lot of people that I've noticed, like they tend to think that this is exclusive, that there's a separation between spirituality and business. And I would like to go on a tangent here. They have like a lot of negative views of like if you are religious and everything like that, you're not supposed to be doing business because there's a lot of negative thoughts and influences about money when it comes to spirituality and everything. Like there's a belief that you have to be poor if you are to be truly spiritual. But there's like it's not really like these are all like negative things that are put by preachers that don't know what they're talking about. Ultimately, in today's world, it has to be a practical balance of both. That you're supposed to use it to help other people, and it's how you use money that ultimately determines your destiny, right? But a lot of people have a negative thought of spirituality and religion when it comes to the application of attainment of money and business. But I don't know, like from your perspective, what are your thoughts on these misconceptions that they have?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Cosmos. I that there definitely are people out there who have this negative thought about money, and it's antithetical to being spiritual. And I struggled with that. Right, when I was first starting Gardner and Grace. I remember like just thinking like, but the divine within is free. Like, what? How could I possibly charge for anything that had to do with anything spiritual? Like, this is a gift that we have as humans. I can't charge. And I really had to work through a lot of what you're saying around it's about what I do with that money. It's about how I use my good in this world, which could include finances. It also is about, I'll tell this really quick story. When I was working at a nonprofit where someone was struggling, they were providing a concert. It was a music concert, and they're like, I got to give it for free. Like this is the people's music. And year after year, when they gave it for free, they saw people come or sign up, but not come. And then they're like, I'm just going to charge $1. I'm just going to charge $1. And when they started charging for it, people followed through with their promise to come. And in that story, what I find is this person wasn't in it to get the dollar, which would have been okay in and of itself, but he had really been struggling with, I want people to get this music. I want them to be moved by it. And for me, hearing that story and watching that unfold, I was like, yeah, if it takes charging $1 to have someone follow through and get that transformative experience of the music, I'm all for it. And that's a lens that I also use in my business of sometimes people need a coach or a guide or a teacher, and they can pay for that. That's okay. It's still free what's inside them. The resource is still free. Sometimes it just takes a monetary exchange to kind of get past that and tap into it.
I think I think you do bring up a very important point about people valuing something. It like in this story that you're talking about, when the person charged like $1, whatever, like they now that there is a monetary value, people actually started valuing that versus like whenever you give something for free, people don't seem to value it on a subconscious level. And it's a very interesting psychology because some of the most precious things in the world tend to be free, like like the love that you have in your family or like a mother's love or a father's love. But like in human psychology has been designed in such a way, and I don't know if it's evolutionary biology or if it's divine or whatever it is, but like people don't value things that are given for free. It's ridiculous.
Yes, exactly. We have a joke in my household that my husband's dad, who has since passed away, he would say, I've got advice, it's free and therefore worthless. And that's talking to what you're saying. Like it's this kind of funny psychology of like, well, if we there's no monetary value assigned to it, then I'm not necessarily going to pay attention to it. It's
I,
interesting.
I don't know if it's just like a Western culture thing or if it's like a universal thing, but yeah, that's something that I noticed. Like people need to value something, but they only when they invest something. I think it's called like an investment principle, like where when you make somebody invest something in yourself or like your advice or whatever it is, then they actually start listening because like they put effort into it. And it's just like an element of human psychology that if the audience or the listeners are listening, you might as well take advantage of that, because people don't value that which is free. It's ultimately a sad, I don't know if it's a sad or a good revelation, but it's just the way things are.
It's an interesting one for sure, for sure.
But Ashley, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was like during like your what was the biggest challenge you had to experience during your like during you journeying from corporate America to start trying to start your business, from you to getting doing spiritual and religious education? Like what is the biggest challenge that you had to face and what did you do to overcome it?
Yeah. Self-doubt, definitively. Self-doubt is the biggest challenge that I have faced in terms of moving out of a corporate environment that was profitable in many ways. And like, can I do this? Can I charge for this? Can I make a living? Can I really impact people? So those voices of self-doubt were huge and a huge challenge. Um, because at the end of the day, Cosmos, I had confidence that I could work in the business world. I had confidence that I could lead children and youth. I had confidence in myself as an educator and a spiritual guide and a mentor. But it was really this going out on my own bit, which I had done at various times. I'd owned a couple other businesses, but this going out on my own sort of for that last time, like, can I really do it? And I'll keep coming back to what solves for that. It's the coming back within, and it's trusting that voice within, and it's quieting those noises, and those voices like, no, you should, and I think parents, as well-meaning as they are, can be some of the loudest voices because they're concerned, right? They're like, oh my gosh, you can't go do something. You can't go be something. Not all parents do that for sure, but I think a parent can be a very loud voice in that. So even like some of family members who are just like well-meaning, just quieting that, for me, with a lot of love and a lot of grace, to come back into what I knew was right. And so it doesn't sound so impractical. I will share with your listeners, there's simple things like I do meditate daily. That is something that quiets my mind. It's something that brings me back into that knowing. But meditation doesn't have to follow necessarily some specific way or some specific path. And I know for a lot of people, meditation can actually be like overactivating, right? It's just too much to quiet. So, if meditation isn't something that's something that your listeners want to do, I would say just get out and walk and count your steps, right? Or just repeat counting 8 steps at a time if they're, able to walk, or count one's breath. They're really simple things we can do. And that focus and coming back into center, I'll keep coming back to it, is really what helped me get over one of those big hurdles, which was self-doubt.
Ashley, there's something that I have to say from my end. So, like, when you're talking about self-doubt and like going within to get rid of a self-doubt, for me, I consider myself like, I wouldn't say a religious person, but more of like a spiritual person, because I think like religious dogma actually prevents you from actually becoming one with God. I mean, it's a controversial opinion, but I stand by that because it's all about dogma and mental theories versus the true path of all religions ultimately was to experience God in practicality. And so going within, doing yoga and meditation for me, like gets rid of my self-doubt a lot of times because I have faith in God. I know that ultimately the universe and the higher power will make things okay, right? And like for people that have self-doubt, like I like either you believe in yourself if you're like atheist or agnostic, but if you believe in a higher power, that's an added bonus because you basically have a lot of faith. And faith to me is the means to get rid of self-doubt. Because when you have faith in the higher power and you have trust and you have a loving relationship with that entity, then it makes things much more easier to go through life because you know deep down that you're not alone.
Yes. Yes, 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 1,000 times. Yes. And I am so glad that you brought up, Cosmos, that idea of religiosity and how religion can actually sometimes pull us from that divine core inside. And I so want to say to your listeners, it is not for me either about the religiosity. And if you have it, that's great. It is not needed. It is not needed. And sometimes for people, that religious dogma and what sometimes I refer to as human hands, like man's hands. That's man's hands making some of that religious dogma. It's not necessarily a spiritual truth or a spiritual knowing. So sometimes that religiosity can really, like you're saying, it's like a counter effect where instead of bringing someone in closer to that divine within, it actually pulls them away and out of it. And it can be really as far along the spectrum as trauma and abuse. And so bringing back into that core, whether it's religiosity or pure spirituality, that's where it's at. That's where it's at. And that's where you know you're not alone. And that's where that self-doubt is like, oh, I don't need to listen to that. I know I'm not alone. You named it so well.
No, I mean, I know, and like for like it's something that's like ultimately ironic because normal like it is basically this dogma that actually takes you away. But when it comes to like practical applications in our life and in terms of business, we need practical spirituality because when it's come like it's not only about financial education, it's about how to respond to the world. And a lot of times when you're in business or when you're trying to make a business work, you're going to go through a lot of stress, but as you mentioned, if you go within and you have faith in a higher power, and then you use that to get out of your self-doubt, and you go within and you listen to intuition and gut, a lot of times that you'll get your answers deep within from there, and then your business will succeed and soar. One of the examples like is I can give at least in my case is this podcast itself. A lot of people like when I decided to leave Texas and come over here for to get help with starting the podcast. A lot of my friends basically doubted me. They said that this is not going to work, right? And then basically, it was a big life decision, like going on a road trip from Texas to Florida, and it was like a life changing decision. But a lot of the time, but during my time over there, I had faith in the higher power. I knew that ultimately it was going to be okay, and it's what allowed me to take the risk, even when all of my friends and all of the people told me like, what are you doing? This is crazy. You have a life over here. You have your friend circle. You have like an entire like thing built over here. Like, and then I was like, no, like I have faith in the higher power and I'm gonna go through with it. And it turned out to be okay. I did manage to create a podcast and I was doing pretty well. But if I did not have faith and I did not have a practical spirituality of like meditating, going within, and knowing in my core it's okay, it's going to be all right, it wouldn't have happened, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that story. And it's for me, oftentimes it shows up as just a small, quiet voice, right? Where it's like, go this path or do this. And just having faith in that, Cosmos, is like, that is such a beautiful story of quieting down the noise of your friends who are like, dude, not gonna work. Don't do this. Don't do this. And I think a lot of times that's really more about sometimes fear on behalf of someone else, or they really want your best interest in mind. And this is a path they don't understand, and they're just trying to help in their own ways. And I try not to give that too much thought and just, wish them well and just turn it down, like you're saying, turn that noise down and look, like, case in point, that is you here doing the podcast is a great example of listening to what is within and moving forward from that and into your business.
I mean, one of the reasons I just bring it up is because a lot of people want to start a business and they want to be successful when they're doing, but usually they end up listening to their peers, their family, their friends, like people that they think they can trust, and they give them this self-doubt, and then they basically discourage them. And there could have been so many more businesses out there. There could have been so many more people that could have succeeded had they had the right environment for support. And that's something that I'm like very sensitive about because I know like you gotta water encouragement is like water, and like your plant, like where you succeed in your business is like a plant, you have to consistently water it. If it's not to yourself, then there's got to be an environment that does that. And so if
Ab-
you're in the wrong environment, it's basically like it's like growing weeds all together. It like the soil is going to deteriorate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there's just a nugget in what you said there. I think sometimes when people are naysaying or, don't go do this, and you're talking about like, but how many businesses could have been out there doing wonderful things? I feel like and this is unfortunate, when we see people succeeding, sometimes it makes us look at ourselves and go, well, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? Why am I still in this job that, so and so just left the job and did something amazing? What am I doing? It forces a person to take a look at them. And I think that can be uncomfortable for people. And so my advice to that is like, just keep your light shining. Just keep your light shining. Like, we don't have to dim the light. You don't have Listeners, you don't have to dim your light. Do not dim your light. Keep turning it up. The world needs to have that voice that your listeners out there have, that the gifts they have, the businesses that they have. Keep turning it up. Keep turning that light up.
No, totally. But so Ashley, like on a different note, I wanted to ask you this about, so like the American identity, it's about the pursuit of happiness, right? And you and I both know that spirituality and going within yourself is one of the foundational like cores that leads to ultimate like long-term happiness. But a lot of people in America don't know that. They believe that having the cars or having like a plane or a jet or living the billionaire lifestyle would make them happy. So, from your perspective, how do you see this entire thing between your perspective of what it takes to be happy versus the American perspective that is now out there?
Yeah. So when I first started on a spiritual journey and meditating, I realized pretty quickly, well, I got words pretty quickly for an experience that I had been having, which is just what you're naming. Like, but I'm not happier in this position at my job, but I'm not happier when I'm making more money, but I'm not happier when I just signed I bought my first house when I was 21, right? But I'm not happier. And I knew that. And when I went on the spiritual journey, I discovered words pretty quickly that it wasn't about happiness, it was about joy. And what happened was coming back into that, what I call that divine light inside, that original goodness inside, that's where the joy was. And I could be sobbing on my knees through a really hard time and yet still feel that interconnectedness, that joy inside me. It can't be extinguished. It's there forever. And so the happiness piece, I often think of those material things, right? Like, well, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when. And here's the sad truth of it all, y'all, is that line keeps moving, right? Well, sure, you'll be happy when you get the Ferrari, but now you need two, or you need a house that has twice as many, um garages for your Ferrari or whatever it is, whatever material thing. And I'm not knocking the material things at all. What I'm saying is that when we start to chase something that is so ephemeral like happiness, it 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 will keep escaping us and we keep needing more. I have this joke with a friend of mine who did really well in the tech industry, and I was like, when is enough, dude? Like, when is enough? He's like, well, when I have my own jet. And I'm like, oh, okay, but which is fine. Yet he kept chasing it, and it never was going to be enough. Is my point. What is enough is that those resources inside. What is enough is that divine light inside. What is enough is you and the voice that you have and the mark that you're meant to put on this world. That is what's enough. That's where the joy is, and that can never cease.
It reminds me of this movie, like I think it was like the 1987 movie Wall Street, where the protagonist asks Gordon Gekko, "How much is enough? How much is enough?" And yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of cliche, but ultimately, a lot of people like they're chasing something that is ephemeral, like impermanent, and they're not going to find lasting happiness of it. But Actually, a continuation of this is like when it comes to the American dream, a lot of people in America, they know that when if they believe that if they attain the American dream, they shall be happy. But from a spiritual standpoint, from a practical application of spirituality, how do you see the American dream, and how should Americans go about attaining happiness in when it comes to pursuing the American dream?
Yeah. Happiness is here in the moment. As cliche as that may sound, that is where it is. It's not something to chase. It's not something to attain. It's something we have. And what's necessary is to quiet down the noise, the taking, the divisiveness, the anger, the vitriol. We need to just like ratchet that down, abolish that altogether. Happiness is in the here and the now, and that really is in joy. When it comes to the privilege that people have, especially in America, and that's not true for everyone in America by all means, but when it comes to people with privilege, that means taking a good hard look at what you are doing with your hands in terms of the work that you're doing, what you're doing with your money, what you're actually chasing. Is it in the service of good? Is it in the service of getting your voice out there? Is it in the service of interconnectedness and tapping into that goodness inside and tapping into somebody else's goodness, right? That connection there. Or is it really just chasing to chase? I mean, these are important questions to ask in terms of the pursuit of happiness or the pursuit of the American dream. Really, are we pursuing joy? Are you pursuing joy in every moment? And from there, I think we start to loosen our grip on some of those things that we thought were so important to us. It just becomes a little looser, and we can navigate in much more free ways.
So Ashley, there's a saying in the Eastern world, like in terms of spirituality, that unfulfilled desire is the root cause of slavery. And then basically we're talking about having happiness within, but a lot of people find they don't find happiness because they have unfulfilled desire and they're frustrated desire. What they want to attain something, like in terms of the American dream, could be a car, it could be the ideal lifestyle. If only I have this. But it's like I know what you're saying is true, but it sounds like to most people consider it only theoretical, because how do you practically let go? You either have to transcend the desire or you got to fulfill it, right? So from your perspective, how would you go about like transcending these? Like, let's say for somebody who's never had a Ferrari and believes that having that Ferrari will give him happiness, and then like ultimately when he finally gets it, it'll last for 30 seconds, but he doesn't know that. So I don't know. What's your perspective on that?
Try it. Go for the Ferrari. Go for it, because it's going to come an experience where you realize, like, oh gosh, there's something else. Oh gosh, there's something else. And there really is nothing wrong with having a Ferrari. There really is not. What we're talking about here is that like unmet desire. I keep wanting, I keep wanting, I keep wanting. And I'm a believer that's that still voice inside of us pulling us back in to say, really, what you need is in here, right? And that's assuming some basic needs are met, right? Like all need food, and we all need shelter, and we all need water. So when our basic needs are met, we should be able to come back into those practices that just still us. And then from there, we truly are free, because from there we can make choice. So if my choice is to go buy that dang Ferrari because I wanted the Ferrari, cool. But if I'm buying that Ferrari because I'm like, oh, I really like, I just need it. I need something else. I need something else. That thirst is never going to be quenched. So my advice is go try it. Go try it. If you're out there and you want that car, like go for it. How do you feel afterwards? Do you feel like, hey, that was something cool and I really did want it and I'm really proud of that and I had fun with it? Awesome. Or is it like, but no, I still need more? I think that's an invitation into, well, maybe that more is more about coming back into what's within to see if we can find that freedom that resides right there inside.
I think actually, like ultimately in all of life is ultimately like an experiential education kind of thing where you're basically it's about like finding limitless happiness, right? Like you want to find true joy and happiness, and it ultimately comes in comes with the divine. Like you go within, you do the yoga meditation practice, and you finally become one with the divine consciousness. But in the process, in the journey, you have to go and try to find happiness through like power, status, the toys, the jets, the cars, and ultimately like you come to the soul comes to the realization that no, this is too limited and temporary, right? This is too limited and temporary. Oh, this only gave me happiness. I mean, and then ultimately, let's say there is a something such as a long-lasting relationship. At death, we have to let that go. So ultimately, yes, like it's a journey towards self-realization, but this is like a necessary part of the experience.
Yes, 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 yes. Experiential. Absolutely. And that, for listeners who are like, oh, maybe that meditation thing's too much, or, I think I've heard of a mantra, but like, I don't know what that is. It doesn't have to be, practices do not have to be complex. They can be super, super simple, and experiencing the world out there is how we do it, right? We going off to some rural place and closing the door and not interacting with people or the noises or the things that come into our lives is not the way to that through that journey inside. It's in that connectivity and in that experience and in the doing, and it can be super, super, super simple. The freedom really can be easy.
I mean, ultimately, like I feel like the reason I'm going to talk about it is because ultimately American identity is about freedom, right? But we are enslaved by our desires for the material realm, and it's that slavery to our desires. We're attached, and if we can somehow transcend that attachment, we'll be more freer, and ironically, that will make us more happy. But it's like a paradox. Like it's kind of like the analogy that I want to that comes to my mind is that of a spider with the spider web. Like if our desire to material world, like with all the toys, is like us being an insect that's getting entrapped into the spider web, and then we're like the spider is now consuming us, and it is our own mind and its restlessness and its need to fulfill those desires that's entrapping us into this cycle of frustration and anger and just like it's like unsatiated desire. But like ultimately, spiritual practices will help us get out of that spider web because it's through non-attachment. Like, okay, you will get it. You want to go after the desire, fine, but be non-attached. Ultimately, it leads to a greater sense of freedom. And that freedom, ironically, will make you more happier over the long term. But that's just my 2 cents on that.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I would even add at the end, and that freedom actually might make you money as well. That's okay. And that you were just so spot on with the freedom piece of it. I there are times in my life where I have been just on the end of the spectrum, dealing with depression, dealing with anxiety, like just crumpled with that. And to be able to speak from a place of such freedom when I can come back into that center, into that divine within, into that calm within, it's a freedom like none other. There's choice like none other. It is really the most amazing experience. And that's why I love that connection to you and your listeners around that American dream around freedom, because it really is there. And I would add, bringing it circle back to the spirits, to the business piece. And it from that freedom, monetary gains can be had as well.
Totally, Ashley. Couldn't agree more. So Ashley, I wanted to ask you about your about Gardner and Grace. I wanted to know like the premise of how you started and the background and what led you into starting this thing, and if you could tell me and the audience a little bit more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Gardner and Grace was a stirring inside of me. I was still at corporate America for the second time when I started Gardner and Grace, and it was really just getting out there, like you were saying, Cosmos, of like, I'm just going to start this podcast. This was me again, just going, I just know this is the right thing to do. And I didn't really know exactly what was going to come of it. I knew that I wanted a connection between spirituality and business, and the business in and of itself is the business part, and the spiritual part is, I call Gardner and Grace the learning hub for the soul. And so I have taught for 20 years everything from meditation to sexuality education and spirituality and sexuality, and mantram walks and mantram writing and religious education. I have taught it all. And I knew I did not want to be the only one teaching. And for one reason is I couldn't get to everybody. I couldn't just be one teacher, and I couldn't get to everybody who needed some just cultivating of their soul work. And I knew I was only one voice. And so Gardner and Grace was founded on this idea that we have this divine light within, and we often hide it. There's just all this crap that's on top of it, something someone said, or messages that we've got, or aggressions that we've had. And we just have this crap on top of us. And Gardner and Grace was founded on the idea is underneath that, there is a divine light so bright, so powerful, it can't ever be extinguished. So 2 ways that Gardner and Grace helps deal with that. One is turning up that light by teaching things that are like meditation and mantra writing and programs that just help us come back into center. And shutting down and knocking off some of that crap that's been put on top of us. And so some of the work that we're doing right now is around sexuality and the messages that people have gotten their whole lives that just add all this like garbage on top. And so Gardner and Grace serves to turn up that light and drop what I call a shame bomb. It's like just drop a lot of that shame that's on top so we can come back in. So Learning Hub for the Soul, I have brought in and continue to bring in teachers and write our own curriculum to help turn up that light and to help drop that shame and that garbage that we just put on top of our light. So that's how it came to be. And that's how I am moving forward with the business model and really getting out there and helping people just feel more free, instead of all tangled up and worried. And it's just to help them feel more free.
That is awesome, Ashley. Everybody needs more freedom in their lives, so that's pretty good what you're doing. And is there any other project that you're working on right now other than this that you'd want the audience to get a glimpse into?
I would love for them to head on over to Ashley Johnson 5280. That's Ashley Johnson 5280, Ashley Johnson 5280. The 5280 is a mile high. That's where I'm headquartered in Denver, Colorado. So Ashley Johnson 5280 is where I am currently housing all of my resources right now. I am looking to actually launch a course. I'm looking at the calendar here, 6 days. In 6 days, I'm launching a course, Spirituality, Sexuality, and You. And it's really designed to help people understand some of the messages that they've gotten around sexuality and gender that maybe haven't been super helpful for them, especially around parenting and how parents can engage in those conversations. They are the primary educators of their children, and help them engage in conversations that are just really free to keep using that word to reduce some of that stress and that anxiety. So that's one of the projects that I'm working on now, and would love for people to head on over and also join my email list.
Awesome, Ashley. So other than your website, how can our audience connect with you to get to know more about you or like reach out to you if necessary?
Yep, that, and the website's the absolute best way to do it. I have a little daily dose. I don't know why I call it that. I think it's cute. It's really a weekly email, but just click on that daily dose and pop your email in there. And that's a great way to stay connected with me. I communicate via email with my community all the time on my weekly emails. I'm giving hope and inspiration and inviting people to respond back, and they do, and I love it. So that's a great way to reach out and get in touch with me, just through the site.
Ashley, that's awesome. And I would like to let you know that like, thank you so much for taking the time to do this podcast with me. I'm really grateful and with all the wisdom and knowledge that you had to share. And I would definitely want you to come back at a later time.
I would love to come back, Cosmos, and thank you and your listeners. I appreciate all the work that you're doing and getting the word out about being an extraordinary American and that freedom and really helping your listeners. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And I want to conclude this show by letting my fellow extraordinary Americans know that look, there's an extraordinary within each and every one of us. It's our duty to awaken it and unleash it. Until next time, bye for now.
Hey there, everyone. Thanks